This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views, and entertainment from Boston and USA. I'm Vioni Dimel. Prathap Perera, a young Canadian Sri Lankan professional, is the founder of Sri Lanka Student Alliance in Canada. Currently, Prathap is the chair of the Toronto Sri Lankan Students Alumni Alliance and is involved with several other Canadian and Sri Lankan organizations. Prathap joins with us from Toronto, Canada. Prathap, what is your reaction to Canada government's decision to boycott the Commonwealth Summit?
First of all, Vioni, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for inviting me to be on the show. I think it's very important for for your show to invite individuals that have different opinions and ideas. So as for your question, my sentiment goes along with most of the other Sri Lankans around the world as well as in Canada. We were a little bit disappointed. The announcement came at the time it did, and also we were a little bit shocked that this announcement was made in this manner. We were with the assumption that our Prime Minister Harper would attend the Commonwealth and engage with Sri Lanka among the other states that were attending this summit. So my sentiment goes a long way with many Canadian Sri Lankans who are here feeling the same idea along those lines.
Do you think Canada's domestic politics played a role in the decision of the Canadian Prime Minister to boycott the Commonwealth Summit in Colombo?
To really look at that question from a different lens, I would like to point out the demographic and population makeup of Toronto itself. We have one of the largest Sri Lankan diasporas outside of Sri Lanka in Toronto, and it is made up of Tamil, Sinhalese, Muslim, Malay, Sri Lankans who have been calling Canada for many decades now. Now, the issue here is that Prime Minister Harper's stance on Sri Lanka and the way it came about, I think it was heavily influenced by certain sections of the Tamil Sri Lankan diaspora, but not all, but certain extreme elements that are within that community. Because if I can recall, Harper's stance was influenced at one of the radio shows back in 2011, and I think there was a heavy lobby behind Harper for him not to go to Sri Lanka and basically boycott the summit altogether. So I do believe there are certain aspects of domestic politics that did play as to why Prime Minister Harper decided not to go to Sri Lanka altogether.
Don't you think some of the reasons Canada has given to justify their boycott, such as Sri Lankan government's human rights violations, accountability issues, media freedom, and rule of law issues, have some validity, and that Sri Lanka needs to pay more attention to these issues?
As for the human rights situation in Sri Lanka and most of the articles and news segments that are being published in the media as of recently, it's basically it's up to the reader to come to their own opinion. However, I do know that every country has its fair share of human rights issues that they are dealing with. Even Canada itself has many human rights issues that they are yet to deal with right now. So I would like to to quote what one of the former British diplomats, Peter Heap, stated in the Guardian. He basically stated that Sri Lanka has been a fully functioning democracy since independence. On human rights, it is not an unblemished picture, but a Royal Commonwealth Society report. Commonwealth compared to 2013, which measured 168 countries on human rights criteria such as press freedom, democracy, and equality. Ranked Sri Lanka 68th in the world and 14th in the Commonwealth, comfortably in top half of each. So he's basically posing the question: would we hear similar calls to boycott a summit in countries listed below Sri Lanka? So, I mean, it clearly shows that Sri Lanka has been a fully functioning democracy with respect to human rights. But there are situations that takes place in Sri Lanka which is not in the control of the government, and it is difficult at times to always finger point and find the perpetrators who are behind these things. But I do believe that the government should also take into account to make sure that these kind of instances and incidents do not take place in the future. But having looked at what former diplomats like Peter Heap had stated, I would think that the Canadian stance is a little bit biased and politically motivated uh, when it comes to the human rights issue in Sri Lanka.
There are some dissenting voices among Canadian politicians saying that it's a mistake for Canada to boycott the summit. Could you elaborate on some of those dissenting voices?
Now, if we are to look at all the major political parties in Canada, they have basically asked Prime Minister Harper to boycott the Sri Lankan summit. Uh, Also, I feel that this was primarily due to the heavy lobby that most of these political parties received from certain sections of the Sri Lankan diaspora in Toronto. But at the same time, when Prime Minister Harper and John Baird stated that they will not be attending the summit in November of this year, certain opposition members, especially in the Liberal Party, John McKay, he stated that this was obviously a political calculus because he himself has several thousands Sri Lankan Tamil speaking uh, voters in his riding, and he felt that, okay, if Harper is basically, boycotting this summit at this moment, there has to be some kind of a political motivation behind it. Same thing, the NDP MP Paul Diwar, who's the foreign affairs critic from the NDP party. He also felt that Harper's current policy must be based on political views. So, and this was posted in Hills Times. So there have been a lot of dissenting voices. There have also been associations, Sri Lankan Canadian associations, that have written to the Prime Minister Harper and the Canadian government requesting them to change their stance on not going to Sri Lanka. And there has also, I know for a fact, there has been like a postcard campaign with over 5,000 signatures requesting Prime Minister Harper to go to Sri Lanka and attend the summit. And also, I'd like to mention former Prime Minister Brad Maroney. He also uh, requested Harper to attend the summit, and he was quoted saying, basically, let's see here. He was quoted saying, if you're going to boycott the Commonwealth because of illustrations of improper government or abusive treatment of people within some of the member countries, some days you wouldn't have too many people around that Commonwealth table for tea. And this Brad Maroney said at a CTV press conference during the question period. So there are dissenting voices, and you can clearly see there is a political angle behind all this.
Do you think the Sri Lanka Canada relations will suffer due to this action taken by the Canadian government?
I personally don't think so. I know that the Canadian government and Sri Lankan government have had a long relationship dating back to Prime Minister Diefenbaker and Pierre Elliott Trudeau's times, where funds were given to Sri Lanka for our development projects and so forth. What I feel is, as for the current Canadian foreign policy was not thought out properly when this decision was made, and I think that silence does not create dialogue, and at the same time, we cannot allow political aspirations to hijack the Canadian foreign policy, because the Canadian government must do a better job in representing all Canadian Sri Lankans, and hear the voices of all the Sri Lankan Canadian diaspora out there. The reason I believe that the relationship won't be hampered is because the Canadian government haven't fully boycotted the summit. There's still going to be the Canadian business delegation that's going to be attending, and they're going to be attending that the business forum in the Commonwealth meeting in full. And also Deepak Obrai, he's the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He has confirmed his participation on behalf of Prime Minister Harper. So it's basically a push and pull factor that's in there right now. So it isn't, as it's not a full boycott. I believe that the Canadian government is also trying to keep an eye on Sri Lanka and to see how the future developments will take place. But it's unfortunate at the moment that our prime minister is not attending the summit. But I believe for the future summit, that's around the corner next year, I'm pretty sure he will, check the ground situation once again and attend the summit.
In your view, Pratap, what is the role Sri Lankan community in Canada can play at present time?
As for my knowledge, yeah, there's a large section in Canada, within the Sri Lankan community, that are proactive and proactively writing to the Prime Minister, as well as other members of Parliament, requesting them to go to Sri Lanka. But I think for the most part, I feel the diaspora in Canada and also elsewhere around the world should always look at Sri Lanka in a different limelight. I haven't seen a country where patriotism or love for the country derives from what political party is in power. So main thing for the diaspora to remember is to put all that aside and basically try to come forward and defend the country for its good name, and put all these other political motives they may have behind, and get countries like Canada to basically engage with the people of Sri Lanka, engage with the Sri Lankan government, because us having a large Sri Lankan population is very important for the Canadian government to go there and get the ground reality and come and relay that message. So many sections of the diaspora that was not able to go to Sri Lanka in the past decades or so are able to go to Sri Lanka and see for themselves how the country is progressing, the developments that's taking place, and also the religious harmony that we see with many communities in Sri Lanka, because I see it firsthand, that we were able to live alongside different ethnicities, and we had no issues. So it's very important that these messages and these stories are brought here, because what is being heard in the outside diaspora is that's not what actually happening inside the country. So it's very important that there's political engagement, and the diaspora work very hard, very dedicatedly, not to throw mud at Sri Lanka, and basically to bring everyone together in peace and unity.
Tell us about your organization, a Sri Lanka Student Alliance in Canada. Could you share some of the activities of your organization?
Well, the Sri Lankan Students Alliance was a vision that I had when I was in my university years. I always wanted to create an association with chapters across colleges and universities, where all the students are able to come together in peace and unity, regardless of their ethnicity, and promote our motherland back home. So when it was established in 2003, I never thought it would spread to different universities and different colleges. So after graduating, I found there were so many chapters in various universities in the GTA, which I also helped establish, along with other executive committee members who were able to go into different areas. So at the end, all the past graduates of the Sri Lankan Students Alliance decided, it's time for us to create an alumni alliance, where we can incorporate both student and alumni, and to help out students in Sri Lanka as well as in Canada, and to promote a prosperous young student community. So in doing that, we have been able to carry out school supply drives in some remote places like Tantrimale, Sri Lanka, as well as places like Trincomalee, and certain parts of Baddigama. And these supply drives are constantly being carried out also by other student chapters in other universities. And also we promote sports activities among other students alliances, and also cultural and work seminars, and uh, as well as workshops for incoming new students, as well as former graduates. So I mean, we do what we can to promote that reconciliation and peace, and I think that it's a step in the right direction to build a better future generation, especially here in Canada, so they're able to understand each other much better and have the space that they didn't have maybe in Sri Lanka, and to also learn about their culture as they grow older.
Pratap, do you think the young Sri Lankan Canadians are getting involved in politics? If there are any, could you please give us some examples?
If you look at the Sri Lankan Canadian community here, I do know that for a fact most of them are very hardworking individuals, and a lot of them do carry a lot of credentials, and they tend to go into professions of their likings, and doors are wide open for Sri Lankans of all ethnic origins in Canada. If they have the right education, there's the ability to move up the ladder. And recently, we have seen MPs, one MP that of Sri Lankan Tamil origin being elected to Parliament, and also there have been several other Sri Lankan Tamil candidates who have run for several political parties. I mean, also there are a few councillors who are of Sri Lankan Tamil background, who are holding positions in certain councils. So I mean, there is a very heavy involvement in that area, but it's unfortunate that some of these MPs tend not to look at the situation in Sri Lanka with both lenses, and tend to be a little bit restrictive in the way they approach the situation, because those leaders, they can actually bring all the communities together and even get the Canadian government to engage with Sri Lanka in a positive manner. But it's unfortunate that there are certain sections within the diaspora who tend to have extremist anti-Sri Lankan views, who do not allow that to happen. So if they keep this section of the diaspora controlled, it will see that not everyone will come together, and while doing that, they will create more issues and more tension to see future conflicts in Sri Lanka. So what we want to do is to create a prosperous future. We want to keep peace and unity, reconciliation among everyone, so that future conflict will not happen. But if all these professionals and all these elected MPs and so on and so forth come together at the same table and have a discussion, and give the right vision and the right image to the Canadian government and other governments around the world, I think these internal scars and external scars that have been created from 30 years of conflict can slowly fade away in the next decade or so. It's going to take time, but I believe it can. But I do believe for that to happen, there got to be more Sri Lankan, uh, Canadian Sri Lankans and other Sri Lankans of origin getting involved with the political system, especially in the United States and also in Canada, so that that vision and that goal can happen.
That concludes our news edition. We meet you again with another news edition of News, Views and Entertainment from Boston and USA. Till then, goodbye.